All right. So welcome, Danielle and Josh, newlyweds. You just got married. So congratulations. So happy for you guys. And you're such amazing couple, beautiful relationship. And it was my honor and pleasure to work with you. So today we want just to have a conversation about working on your relationship when you actually have good relationship already, when you love each other and you're like about to get married and you made that decision, you reached out to me and you decided to work on your relationship, even though you already had such a strong and powerful foundation. So we would like to talk about that to inspire other people to start at this like positive note, not to wait until like there is a big problem or like there is something that is, you know, heavy happening. So my question would be probably the first question I would like to ask is like, what inspired you to reach out and decide to work on your relationship when you felt it's already good?
Um, well, I grew up with like parents who were divorced and like didn't see a lot of successful relationships growing up. So I always felt like I was very aware that, marriage is not easy and that it doesn't always work out. And like we've both done some work on ourselves, but we hadn't really done much together. And I knew I wanted to do some sort of like, process before getting married, to make sure we're like having all those important conversations. And we didn't have major issues, but there were things that weren't like optimal that I could see down the road becoming an issue. And I could see it, like if everything magnified, that things would get harder. So yeah, I think I felt motivated to address those things, and I didn't really know how to do that on my own. I don't think I knew like how to communicate as well as I feel like we do now. And I didn't necessarily know like what to say. And it was like very helpful to have someone that does know like what's important and can look at it from like an objective standpoint and make sure we like work through all of those things and like feel safer when there's someone else there.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you, Danielle.
And
Josh?
just to add to that, I think there were topics that you brought up that we didn't really think about having, the need to talk about, beforehand, or like
Yeah.
the forethought to like, what do you want to get out of a family? What do you want your relationships to be with other family members, like finances, the day-to-day stuff, like all that stuff. There's such a broad range of topics that weren't really on my radar of things that might like be point of contention or whatever, things that we just like want to align on, or like at least like understand where each other is coming from. And just I don't know. Also, I think we just really wanted, or I just really wanted to, have an opportunity to deeper our connection and like strengthen the foundation when things were going good.
Yeah.
So that like the processes and the skills are in place when things aren't going so good, that we could like overcome them better.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I'm curious if you want to share a few topics that were the most insightful for you and that you mentioned maybe you were within your blind spots before and suddenly you realize, oh, those ones are important. We didn't think about it.
Yeah, I think we talked kind of a lot about like what people bring into the relationship from like past relationships and like family dynamics, and by going through specific examples of like points of contention and like past disagreements, and just talking through them in like a safe, structured setting. I really like learned about Danielle's like triggers and past traumas and like current reactions that she's like working to reprogram. And just I think that whole method of going through things in a very specific manner was very beneficial.
Yeah, I liked how we were able to talk about specific situations, like a minor thing that might have come up, but it became like a lot more generalized. So it's not like we would spend the whole time talking about like who's doing the dishes. Like it would become a larger conversation, and then we can implement that moving forward. I had another thought, but I forgot it.
Mm-hmm. Like the containers, right, for each area of
Right.
relationship, like to become clear and how they're connected with each other. And
Yeah, and I feel like we spoke specifically about like plans for things that are going to happen in the future, and like, okay, this situation with this family member, like we have discussed specific ways that we'll deal with it. So it's not just sort of like this general sense of like, oh, this, we have an issue with this person, but like, what can we actually do about it?
mm-hmm. Like creating agreements with each other. It's like being on the same page, or this is how we do when this thing comes up, right? And having those templates kind of in place that you can pull in, and then you can still kind of customize it to a situation, but already having an understanding that, okay, we have agreements about it, right? That's
Right.
something important that many people don't do when they enter relationship and form families and marriages, right? They don't have agreements in place. And how do you navigate if you don't agree on these things, right? Yeah, definitely.
I think just like
yeah.
one more thing that for me, like I learned a lot with the idea that like you should more often than not, like if something comes up for you, that it's okay to share it.
Mhm.
Because I was always wondering, like, you know, I don't want to always start an issue. I don't always want to like cause a problem, and maybe we should let things go. And like learning that the more we can have those conversations and that they're successful, even if it's about something very minor. I feel like I learned a lot from that I wouldn't have gotten elsewhere.
Mhm. Yeah, like giving yourself permission to bring it up, even if it's a small thing, and not to be afraid. Oh my God, I'm like making a mountain out of anthill.
Yeah.
And I remember we talked to like bring it up just for the practice. So you
Mhm.
practice communication, and you practice like understanding each other and finding that common ground that you like on the same page. It's like, okay, that's what we can do together, like developing a skill, right? Yeah, I'm also curious about navigating the differences between feminine and masculine. This is something big for so many couples, right? Because initially we're created like existential polarities, right? The feminine is completely different from the masculine. And sometimes it's really hard to bridge, and we can project our perception or the way we wired, the way we roll, we went the way we perceive things, and it's not necessarily the same way on the other side. So if you can share a little bit about learning curve, about these differences, feminine, masculine, and how it helps you in your relationship.
Yeah, I think I didn't know much about it when we started, but I think we quickly learned that we very much fit like the classic masculine and feminine energy between us in the relationship. So I mean, we have these like different needs and like different ways of going about things, and just learning more about the feminine energy, and like learning more about like, you know, the need to, you know, talk and, you know, go slow and like create like a really deep like safe space. Like I think it's all been helpful just knowing where like Danielle's coming from when approaching a situation or when talking about a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like what Josh was saying, like we're very much like fit the like feminine and the masculine. And so sometimes there is like that gap where like I'm over here on something and he's so far on the other side, and it's like kind of hard to meet in the middle. And so I feel like just knowing that the way that like you like think and feel about things is just like part of who you are. I don't need to like change it, but just work with it in a way that's going to be more effective. Because I like want you to feel like good and happy in the relationship. I wasn't always like sure how to make that happen. So yeah, I think it gives us a better sense of where the other person is coming from. And then it's not about like, oh, you don't like talking about emotions, but like you're choosing to not try. It's like, no, that's just a different space than like where I come from. So it's really helpful.
Yeah, emotions is kind of central piece here, because like men process emotions completely differently, right? And also it takes longer to process those emotions, because this is how, we're just wired differently, and we have these differences with our sexuality and with our emotions, and then it's like the opposites, right? So what did you learn specifically about emotional process, about like something emotional comes up for both of you? What is that maybe innovation? What is that innovation, and what is that new perspective that you gained of how to navigate like emotional situations, knowing that knowing these differences between you two?
Well, I learned in myself that I'm not necessarily gonna have like the answer of like how I'm feeling right away. And like I might need to like, I think you taught us like, I can like raise my hand when I'm like at 90% capacity and I'm like, we can wrap up this conversation soon because I'm getting overwhelmed. Or just the ability to like take a break and like reflect on it and then come back with like a more clearly defined like response of like how I'm feeling. And not like beating myself up to be like, oh, I just don't know, and then I get defensive, but like really, things just happen slower.
Yeah, that's true. That's what men usually need, right? Like to take some time and like really sit with it and like become aware, because sometimes it's like overheating kind of like electrical device, like you just can't process any more emotions and you need to take a break. And sometimes women have hard time to understand that, but it's kind of real, almost physiological situation where there's like it's just not possible at this time, right? So that was something that is very important for people, to learn, definitely.
I think it was really helpful for me to know that like where the emotional side comes more naturally for me, it like doesn't come as naturally for you. And so while you can have like strong feelings, articulating them is not as straightforward as it is for me. And it took away some of like taking things personally. If like I'm upset and you don't like immediately come out with like, oh, I love you, like it's gonna be okay. Like you don't immediately know all the right things to say. It's not because you don't care. It's just because it doesn't come to you right at that moment. And I think at the same time, like I think like a lot of is a result of like the conversations that we've had and the work that we've done. I've been like very surprised because I've seen you grow like so much in your ability to like talk about emotions and talk about how you're feeling. And so it makes me like have a better appreciation because it's like, oh, this isn't easy for you, but you're like have grown so much in that ability. So that's been really great.
Yeah, that's so beautiful to hear your appreciation, because it is a stretch for men to like, you know, kind of stepping out of the comfort zone with this emotional processing and sharing and feeling exposed and feeling like, oh, I'm not that good with this, as women are, and still doing this work and still showing up and like seeing that progress, like, okay, when we accept each other and give each other space and like having that compassion and like understanding, that it makes it so much easier to build that bridge and like to bring each other to the same page, right? Rather than like trying to pull the rope from both sides. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the connection night, because this is something like universal piece that I usually introduce to all the couples. And because people are so busy and there's so many responsibilities and duties. And when you create a family, it's even more on your plate. So what is the value of this idea and practice of connection night, and how it helped you to feel more connected?
I really appreciate that you suggested it because then I don't have to suggest it. Like, I don't have to be the one, like, let's talk, let's express ourselves. And like, now it's just like a standard for having like a healthy relationship. So I feel like I didn't have to I don't have to be like pushing that. Like it's already kind of like a standard. And then I think like on that same line, like the fact that we should be talking like every week about like how we're feeling and how things are going. And it doesn't have to be a bad conversation, but just like that space is open and available. Feels very reassuring to me, because I don't like being the person to be like, okay, time to talk. Like I want to be fun and like nice to have around, and not always like naggy and trying to have a conversation. So I feel like I have permission now, like once a week, to say my feelings, and that it can be received at that time.
Yeah, I think you did a very good job of setting up connection night to be fun and positive too, and doesn't and it doesn't have to always be like, okay, what's the problem this week. It's be a lot more playful, and it really used to like connect on the good things and the bad things. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's totally true when women bring it up. It's like, we need to talk. And then that sounds like so heavy for men sometimes. And it's pretty universal, I noticed, for many couples, when it's like, oh, there is a problem. We need to like, it's going to be a serious conversation, like, so to make it like, to just create space for whatever is real, right? Like to even ask that question, what is real? It's so like such a relief, because it's like, it can be anything. It can be fun and positive and exciting, or it can be something that maybe not perceived the same way, right? There might be clearing some misunderstandings, or maybe we need to release or process something that, because we don't have time during the week to focus on that, because so much is going on and we still need to rest and sleep well. So yes, this is totally a good point to like, okay, let's do that, let's clear everything, and also enjoy each other's company and deepen our intimacy, and like be present, right, in this beautiful space with each other. Yeah. So to wrap up the conversation, maybe the question I'd like to ask, what's like the biggest takeaway or like insights about the relationship that you learned that maybe you didn't know before? Something like maybe something connected to Tantra, because we did explore a little bit of Tantra, and it's connected to differences between feminine and masculine, and slowing down and being present and doing some practices as well. I know you've both done inner work before, and practice yoga and meditation and breath work. So anything that you can add, like, okay, that would be something that, it's very important to learn.
I think the Tantra stuff was really helpful, because I wouldn't say it was like an issue that we had with like sexuality, but it was just something that was like not really, we didn't really have a format for talking about it. And we didn't really have a solution to like, how is this going to be over the long term? And so now it's sort of like, there's like troubleshooting where like, these are the areas that tend to be like, okay, the energy is like a mismatch, and I'm like putting pressure on myself to get to a certain point. And so like, I feel like all of those like sticky spots, like Tantra kind of has a solution for it. And it was a lot of like rewiring of what I've been taught as a woman. So it felt like just a big relief that a lot of the like ways that I was being before, I didn't have to anymore. And then you can have like a more genuine connection when you're showing up authentically.
Yeah.
I'll just add I think I wasn't expecting to go down that route when we started. Like I was fine with our with our sex life, but I think our work with you was really strengthened it, and like gave us a lot more tools to work with, and a lot meaningful experience. And I think that's very unique in life, to be able to have like those conversations and learn and be able to discuss sex, because it's a very like taboo subject and there's not a lot of spaces to do so. So yeah, it was, I mean, a huge benefit that was unexpected but much appreciated.
I think
Yeah.
like a lot of the benefits feel like a little bit intangible, but then there will be like lots of moments where I'm like, oh wow, like we wouldn't be where we are without like all the work that we did with you. Like I was just home with my mom a couple weeks ago, and I was like teaching her the stuff about like masculine and feminine like sexuality and things, which is like cool because like her generation's even more, you know, like different from Tantra. And then also I was like writing my vows, and I feel like we got so much of the stuff that I know now about our relationship out of like working with you, because we just developed a lot more intentionality and like how do we want to be, and like what does Josh need from me and what do I need. And I don't think I would have been able to write those things like without the work that we've done. I don't know what, like if I knew what kind of relationship we wanted to have or how I was supposed to be showing up. So I think that's really huge. And then I think we also just have like a much stronger foundation than we did before. Having like some of those really difficult conversations, it makes me feel like we can talk about stuff when we need to talk about stuff. And just knowing like that you're committed to our relationship and you're willing to work on stuff, and like I'm the same. It just like I feel like we have a lot more trust and understanding and like can rely on each other more.
That's beautiful. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, Tantra is like the foundational agreement is truth and growth, right? So, and we always check with energetics that what's the energy saying to us. So it's not only like verbal conversation, but also like scanning the energy. What's the energy between us, right? And like what's the energy within, you know? So yes, this is so beautiful, and it's pretty universal. This is something that I noticed. Like people think that it's we have some kind of strange problem out there, and we don't know how to do it, and we're not going to talk about it. But then it becomes like, oh, it's actually everyone has the same. So we say what is personal is universal for many people. Of course, everybody's unique, but there are so many things that we share as human beings as well that just important to provide the education for these things. And yeah, it can be even helpful with for previous generations if they're open to learn. Yeah, so what would you recommend for couples who decide to be together for long term or get married? And I mean, it's kind of the same question that I asked at the beginning, but I mean, like as a conclusion of our conversation, why is it so important to like start when you when you don't see all these problems, right? When when you feel everything is great, we just like want to be together and see what happens. Like what would be your kind of recommendation as like newlyweds, you got married, you seem to be very happy and satisfied and excited about the future, well equipped. So what would be your recommendation?
I had something and then I got lost.
I'd say that if we're not like working on like strengthening our connection and like strengthening on like getting to know each other more and like growing together, then we're probably either like stagnant or moving apart. So it's like important just to, like for us to invest like the time and the energy into like talking and connecting and getting close to each other. And then I mean, now's the time when there's like, when we have no kids and like no stress, little stressors in our life to like, be able to talk about like the little minor differences, like leaving dishes in the sink. So when like the big differences come up later in life, we have the framework and we have the tools and we have the practice to like overcome those sort of things.
Yeah, I noticed like in the work that we did, that I think there were a lot of things that could have become bigger issues over time if we didn't address them. And there were things like just from like the 3 years we've been together that like I needed to heal from like within our work with you. And so I think if we didn't address it, like it just builds and builds and builds. And there was like still sort of like a healing time just for that short amount of time we've been together. So I feel like the sooner the better, because we can't read each other's minds and it's hard to communicate sometimes and it's hard to know what the other person needs. So like the sooner you have that information, the easier it is to show up in your relationship in like a helpful and healthy way.
Yeah, I love what you shared about this. Yeah, that's this piece of education that sometimes like we think, it's not a big deal, but because it happens so many times, it kind of builds up over time, and it can bring, people to the place where they feel resentful and they feel disconnected, and over the years, it can damage the relationship, even if it doesn't feel like a big deal right away, right? So that's something that we can refer to as universal knowledge, and can help so many couples to actually build a healthy foundation, like based on truth and growth.
Yeah, I think another thing that I found like particularly helpful just about working with you, because when we were having conversations about like doing some work on our relationship and things, I felt like if we had gone to just like a regular therapist, they would have wanted to work like, what's the problem? And kind of like, why are you here? And I felt like coming to you, we didn't really need to explain like why we were there. Like you already had all of these things that we could work on, even if there were areas that were good, like we could still improve them. So we didn't need to come up with stuff to like talk about or like think of every possible issue. Like we got so much of that from you. So I feel like anyone could kind of just like show up and you could take them through and bring stuff up that they need to work on or that could be improved.
Wow, this one is so insightful. I'm glad you shared this, Danielle, because it's something that what I see the challenge out there in the society, that we just like focus on problems, but we don't really have like understanding what we're actually creating here and who we are in terms of like unique beings as a personality and the archetype and the way we are wired, the way we're all different. So how we're different from another couple, and what is the healthy way for us to create the container with our partner who is also unique, that will work for us uniquely, and that it actually feels good and spacious, and we don't feel like suffocated or squeezing ourselves in some kind of universal container, right? Like, so yeah, that's very important, of course, and that's something that I specialize specifically on creating this customized relationship container for each couple, so they feel like they don't need to alter themselves. They can only grow stronger with who they are and what they will desire, what they desire to create in this life and share, right? Well, thank you so much for taking time and having this interview, this beautiful conversation. I'm sure it will be helpful for so many couples to hear you and get inspired and work on their own relationship. And again, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. You're amazing. And yeah, I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you so much.